Hey, everybody, and thanks for joining us. My name is Jake Milstein, and today we're going to talk about how to build a communication plan for a ransomware attack. And if you've been to our webinars before, you know that we have talked about what it's like to go through a ransomware attack. You know that we've talked about what happens in the system. We've talked about who the bad guys are. We've talked about how you need to prepare for a ransomware attack, how you detect one quickly, and how you respond to one. And we've touched on communications plans. We've said, okay, you need to communicate internally, and we've talked about that. But we haven't really ever focused on, okay, this is what communication should look like. And quick story that to get us started, I was at an event with a bunch of hospitals and the American Hospital Association, and one of the things that came up is one of the CEOs said, how do we communicate with the media? Well, you got a couple of people here from the media today, and we're going to talk about that. So, things to know. If you haven't been to our webinars before, you must know the chat is over on the right. You can mute the chat if you want. There's a little bell on the top. If it's going ding, 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 and you want to stop going ding, 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 you can push the bell. You will get a recording of this. We will also put it on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/critical insight. And you may even be watching this on YouTube, which is so meta that I just told you it's where you're watching it. And you will get the slide deck. If you're watching it on YouTube, you don't have the slide deck, and you can email me, jake@criticalinsight.com, and I will send you the slide deck. So do me a favor, go over on the right. Let us know where you're joining from. Would love to know where you are. I am in downtown Seattle, where it is not sunny. So who are we? Critical Insight defends critical infrastructure against cyber attack. We help organizations prepare for a cyber attack, detect one quickly, and respond decisively. And we'll talk about a little bit more what we do later. And today we're joined by a longtime friend of mine, Neil. Neil now works for Resolute. Neil, tell everybody what Resolute is.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Jake. And Resolute's a strategic advisory firm. We serve national and international businesses, nonprofits, government agencies, and we spend a lot of the time advising boards and C-suite executives on how to be ready for any number of cyber incidents or physical security incidents, and how to respond when you're in the middle of such a crisis. And a lot of that response is a tactic of communication, which depends on a strategy of communication. So we'll talk about that today. And I've been with Resolute for about a year now. And Jake and I actually met in a newsroom in Washington, D.C. when I was in a freelance reporter days, way, way back. And I had done cybersecurity on the Hill when literally 2 people were working on cybersecurity in the U.S. House. This was just after 9/11. And I was making a transition really from journalism into policy, and then did more policy communications. And since then, I've worked with Gartner on a lot of large companies, cybersecurity plans, and trained CIOs and CISOs for how to communicate through a crisis. And that's a lot of the time that we spend now at Resolute.
And for those of you who don't know, my background before I joined Mike here at Critical Insight was that, I ran newsrooms. Neil and I worked together. He was a reporter and I was an executive producer. So he was the one out covering the stories, and I was the one making the decisions about what should be covered, how they should be covered, helping reporters edit their stories and the like. And that'll come up today because, when you look at communication plans and you think about newsrooms, how do the newsrooms think about covering your event is something we can talk about. But for Critical Insight, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer. I run our events. So happy to see Neil again, even if just virtually, because when we were in the newsroom, believe it or not, it was in person. All right, Brad is one of our here is at Critical Insight with me. He is a VCSO for small and medium organizations. He's been at organizations in their security teams around the country, and he's going to talk a little bit about when he had to battle a ransomware attack. And then Mike Hamilton is founder of the company. He is currently our CISO. He's the former CISO of the city of Seattle, and he is a punk drummer, which I am under contract to say every time he is on a webinar. Okay, so why do comms matter? So having the right communication strategy, Neil, helps you save money, you get credit for work done right, and you mitigate reputation damage. Can you give us 30 seconds just on these 3 bullets?
For sure. I mean, a negative story can derail an investment round. It can lose customers. It, number 1 and number 3 go hand in hand, and they all really do. All 3 of these go hand in hand. You're doing things to prepare. You're doing things to protect your customers. You're doing things to be an active, maybe civic engaged entity in your communities. You got to talk about those things, or else no one knows it. So how you build up trust depends on how much you talk about the things for which you deserve that trust. And so we'll talk about that with a number of scenarios coming up. But in the end, it all comes down to protecting your reputation, especially during an event that could cost you that reputation. So the way you communicate during a crisis, the transparency you have, not just because of compliance, but because it's the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to talk about with the people you're in relationship with, whether they're an investor, a customer, a patient. These are the people that are going to look askance at you when things go down, and you're going to want to be able to be as upfront with them as possible to give that reassurance and to protect your good name with them.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the audience here and seeing that there are a lot of folks from the public sector here. We've seen it cost people elections too. And so when you're talking to your elected leaders, like, you get this wrong, and it can cost folks elections. The other thing is, there's a hospital that we know of that got hit by ransomware. What is it now? 3 years after the ransomware attack, they are still seeing their patient loads 30% down from where they were. And when you ask in the community, they're like, "Oh yeah, weren't they the ones that had the criminals in their network?" It's not quite what they say, but it's problematic. So, Brad, you were at a company that got hit by ransomware. Can you talk us through the scenario and what happened, and then we'll have Neil chime in on how to communicate about it?
Yeah, for sure. So I was at a company in a previous life. We were a larger company with a very large customer base, roughly 250,000 customers, and then they had customers of their own. We were hit by a threat actor out of Russia. They got in. They were doing the double extortion thing. Pay us once to get your systems back. Oh, and now we've got all your data. Pay us again for that. We failed to really detect that in the beginning. We weren't looking in the right places to have caught it early, and so the damage was pretty decent. We managed to figure out where it came from. We managed to track this individual down. We found out that we were not the only organization in the U.S. that had been hit. There were multiple. The part of the problem, we had a hard time getting attribution because a lot of the systems that they had used for their initial foothold had since been decommissioned. So we couldn't go back and pull logs off systems. We didn't have that. These systems had been decommissioned a while ago. We ended up having to work with several third-party vendors. We did not have an incident response retainer with anybody. That would have saved us a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money. So I highly recommend people get incident response retainers. So we were kind of going from square one, working with external legal counsel, working with external firms that we would ship systems off to so they could do like their analysis on them. It was a big deal. A lot of people think of a ransomware attack and they think just of the ransom as far as, oh, that's what you're going to lose. The ransom in this case was very, very cheap. It was a $50,000 ransom is all. It ended up costing us over $3 million by the time all was said and done, between all the overtime that we had to pay out to people that were working long hours to deal with this, all the external third-party vendors, not having an incident response retainer already in place and having to pay for that like just all up front. So it was a significant cost. And then there was the reputational damage. It was, we had a lot of customers that churned as a result of this. They felt that their data wasn't safe, and it wasn't. We had lost some of their data, so that's understanding. And then you wind up, even after the incident was resolved, we wound up in like this never-ending cycle of endless litigation. Our stock price dropped by, it's about $2 a share. and it dropped for a day and a half, 2 days, and then it came right back up. But it didn't stop people from filing lawsuits against us. And we had several class actions that were filed that we were continually fighting. And a lot of them were dismissed, but without prejudice. So those people could just continue to refile. We had people like myself. I had a bunch of stock in the company, believed in the company, still believe in that company. Had a bunch of stock in the company, but I could no longer trade in stock because now I was in possession of material non-public knowledge. So my trading window was permanently closed until this issue was resolved. And it took us a good year before the trading windows opened back up because of this continuous litigation. And then one of the hard parts around the communications with this is we had several different communications vectors that were going on. You know, we're telling one thing to the press. We want to be very transparent and very honest. You never want to lie because that's going to come back and bite you. But we didn't give the press all the details, right? Leadership got some of the details. Employees got some of the details. Customers got some. Law enforcement. The things that we were telling people were different. So that became a little bit tricky to be able to keep track of. Neil, what are your thoughts on communications in a situation like this, where you do have different bits of information that you're providing out based on who the client is that's gonna receive that information?
Yeah, I think on that specific question, you do need your leadership and your board to really know the most. And that doesn't mean that, in my view, the media needs every same detail as a leadership team member. And your customers and your employees, I think, are somewhere in the middle too. The question is not making it hard to, first of all, you're right. You never lie. Second of all, there is a scale of how much detail that you do need to share to all. But if you keep a plan in your head of, all the details are known at the leadership level, and then, much more sort of tranched out for a customer audience or an employee audience, and media then probably somewhere around that scale as well, is much more helpful, because then you're not going to need to worry about explaining all the details to the employees. You need them to know what they're going to need to know for their jobs, need them to know what's going on and why there's a disruption. And you need to give them some guidance for those who are public facing in some way. If you're a hospital, your patients are calling, they need some talking points. People need some direction. And so if you can scale things down in like a normal way, it doesn't mean you're telling different stories to different audiences. It just means you're giving more summary type information to the larger audiences. And then that goes for the
Neil, Neil, when you're thinking about that, then are you saying like, hey, we're going to create like 4 different Word documents, with different talking points for different audiences, and then distribute them?
The short answer is yes, but in our practice, we keep it all in one document for the leadership team. So then the communications director, or maybe a marketing VP, can just take out the page that they need to copy paste into an email to employees, or copy and paste to the customer call center. Like, here's the elements that you're going to need, for this team. Here's the elements for managers of people, but it all is housed in one overarching playbook. So in the end, you've got something that you can deliver to people. And like you said, Brad, if you've got a retainer in place to have someone to help you on this stuff on the front end, you might have a playbook ready to go then. And then when you are hit, you're just really tweaking the details of, something that's more of a generic plan, to be germane, of course, to the actual instant that you're dealing with. And so you get a running start when you're building your communications out.
So Neil, when you're, the first thing on this slide is initial detection failure. Is there ever a point at which you say publicly, we failed to detect this? Or is that always something you just never say?
The word failure is strong. I don't think we have a lawyer on the panel today, but we work with the lawyers all the time. And I don't think I've ever had a lawyer, say, yeah, let's use that word. You can reveal the information has been accessed by a third party. You can reveal the impact of what has happened, but some law firms will be really reluctant to approve using language that admits fault at that level. You can say that, you had a systems failure, but you don't necessarily say that, the organization has failed. So yes, these are nuanced, and I don't like our executives, for our clients to ever have to feel like they're being squirrely about, accepting responsibility for, in the end, their company and their actions. But very often they're using a third party for their patching and for their network, and they don't necessarily want to throw that third party under the bus right away either. In some cases, they never want to do that. And it doesn't look good to be able to say, oh, well, we trusted this vendor, and really sorry, but all your data is out there now. Not our fault. That doesn't look good either. And so being honest and forthright, but in a way that you don't, especially in the early days of an incident, not digging yourself a hole that you might have to replace information later on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, Brad, a question from Jennifer here. Could you share how you handled input from multiple teams within the organization?
Yeah, sure. So we had the incident response manager who was heading up this incident was the point of contact. As we gathered information, so we had several different teams that were providing us information. It would all come into the incident response manager, who shall remain nameless, but he's on this call. And so the job of the IR manager was to gather this information, kind of collate it, and then to provide information back out as well. So like we had individuals that were in our call center, and as we notified customers, hey, we had a security incident. We wanted to let you know what happened. And this one was caused by a third party, like you're talking about, Neil. We did not want to throw that third party into the bus. That third party had our AWS root keys, and they were breached. And then they never told us that they were breached. The way to handle an incident is not to point the finger and try and place blame elsewhere. You suck it up and you get through it, and you tell your customers, hey, this is what happened. So we provided things like FAQs for our call center people. They didn't know all the intimate details of the breach. They didn't need to. We also didn't want to read in more people than we had to, because we don't want to affect people's ability to trade. And, we don't want people to make up things, if customers ask. So they had a defined FAQ, and they would run off of that. And so then they would, any questions that were on the FAQ, they would direct them to me. They would give out my email address, and the customers could reach out to me, and then I would fill them in as much as we could. But yeah, we had a single point. We didn't have multiple people that were getting information in and then trying to figure out what to do with it. It all came to one spot. So we knew exactly what we had. We knew what was going out, what had already gone out, what we were preparing to release, for each hourly update, things like that. So I don't know if that answers the question. If not, feel free to rephrase it.
And I was just going to say in the chat, Emily has tasked Neil and me with creating a model template for folks that we'll send out after we create it. I'd say we'd send it out today, but we haven't created it yet. So that's a really good idea. We'll do that. Neil, so we're going to move to a different scenario here, one that Neil dealt with. Neil, why don't you talk about this one and what happened?
Sure. I feel like this is a classic sort of two-step situation. This is the shy and not shy at the same time. Shy at detection. They're holding information in. They're embarrassed. This is a case of a very large hospital network in California, and the hospital executive, the CEO, is actually the one who clicked on a phishing email, and so the door gets open to the threat actor from the top of the organization, and the executive is feeling embarrassed. And as things start to go down, they need to reveal, they're the one who clicked. Their IT team is engaged. Obviously there's going to be internal folks who know sooner or later. But there was a little, self-accountability that had to be taken amongst the executive team because of where it started. That's embarrassing, but it also cost them a day because the embarrassment and the emotion of it took time for the executive to feel like they could engage with their peers. So now they're a little bit behind because they've spent that time in that first day or so. But then when it came time to respond, this was a hospital network that was really known for its community engagement, well known for being very transparent, and they wanted to say everything right away. And we had a forensics team engaged. We were engaged through a law firm. And the fact is, the situation is changing. It's early days. They don't know exactly all of the data that the ransomware threat actor has. And so to tell employees and tell their patients that they know you've all been affected and, here's your guidance for how to have, your credit protected and your identity protected and all of that. The fact is they didn't really know, they hadn't verified yet from the forensic side who was impacted. And so this appetite to be that proactive in those early moments, sure, it might make the patients feel like thankful for your transparency. They might feel like they're happy they're notified. But the fact is they may not be a part of that audience that really needs to be notified. Their information may not have been impacted. And so now you've got the negative side of losing credibility by, in essence, changing the story and going back to someone and saying, well, actually, in the end, you weren't affected. Well, actually, in the end, these systems were fine. And so the facts are changing on you. The investigation's ongoing. And that means your story is evolving. And now you look like you don't know your story. And so this is where we have the sort of classic case of like the journalist in me from that first career wants to say everything and share everything and be uber transparent. But then the legal folks I've worked with have sort of hammered it into me enough of, you know what, if that's not true, you're going to have a stickier situation on your hand, re-explaining yourself when those facts change and they do come out and maybe they're worse or maybe they're better. But just the fact that they've changed makes people second guess your narrative going forward. So it's a balancing act there. And in this case, the California hospital, they didn't have any major media fallout. They ended up with a good relationship with their customer base and their patients, but there were some sticky days in that first week or so where they really wanted to share a lot more, but we just didn't know what the more was going to be.
And they ended up getting a couple of things wrong as they shared things too quickly. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So when there is an ongoing investigation, you don't have to say anything, right? That has always been kind of the, it's a little bit of a safe harbor. But a lot of the lawsuits that I see now are from employees or patients or those who are affected by unauthorized disclosure of records. And they come back and they say, you didn't notify us in a timely way. Aren't those kind of competing interests, right? Law enforcement and an investigation is going on and we don't want to say anything. We don't have to. And then later you do have all the information and you say something. And then everybody that's affected says, well, you didn't notify us in a timely way. And now we're feeling the impact of this. And whether or not that's true is another issue, but don't those things, aren't they kind of?
They are. I mean, and that is the conflict that we see in the boardroom debates. We see in executive team debates. And more often I'm seeing, at least in the medical space, I'm seeing a lot more on that public sector side and the hospital side where the client says, hey, I don't care what the attorneys are telling me. I am known for being transparent with this audience. I want to tell them that they might have been had their information accessed. Their private information and their personal information might be out there because we know we're going through an incident right now. I'd rather tell them that there's a maybe than tell them there's an incident, we're not sure, but systems are back online soon, and not have that what's in it for me answer for that audience. And so we are seeing our clients go back towards that transparency side in the beginning. And it is better to be able to say, hey, look, we told you it was a maybe. And, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 3 months later, you say, you know what, our full investigation is complete. And it was really only these 400 people. So if you're on the list that got an email that said maybe a few months ago, you can relax if you didn't get another email saying
delete the email now.
Yeah. And I see Mark in the chat saying if the entity has an incident response plan,
it's a good idea.
It would be a good idea to tell the public that you were able to mitigate the impact of the attack because you have a plan in place. Also, having a best practice incident response plan may be helpful in mitigating damage awards and lawsuits. I think that's true. Neil, do you find people saying, we have, this happened, but we have a good cyber posture and we're able to limit the attack?
So this is also where it gets tricky. I mean, obviously, there's a desire to speak in the moment of what are we doing next? Regardless of what has happened, regardless of how the intrusion occurred, giving that assurance of here's the things that we're doing for you today. But in the end, the reader is still thinking, the audience is still thinking, well, it didn't work yesterday, apparently. Something didn't go right. And I think that that's the struggle, because you're often trying to say the good things that you have done, but those good things you have done, in the end, they didn't work in the last time. And so you're trying to balance that admission.
So you're trying to get back the respect, the believability that you
Exactly.
lost because you have this attack, even if you're the victim of a nation state. I mean, you can't protect against Russia, right? And so you're trying to battle that with your communication.
Yeah. Yeah. And Peter's got a great point here in the chat. Like, there's this temptation to put numbers and timelines on things like, we'll be back up tomorrow, we'll be back up next week. And the fact is, especially if that investigation is still going on, you don't know. You just don't know.
Don't make promises you can't keep. Yeah, for sure.
That's a great one, Peter.
Yeah. So
when you do make promises, make sure that you can, like we would say, we'll have another update in 4 hours.
Yes.
Make sure that you are like to the minute on that 4 hour mark. Make sure that you're not going late on things like that, because people won't like that at all. Rightfully so.
Yeah.
And Neil, what happened in this one where the picture impugns a golden retriever puppy?
It's the puppy's fault. This was a Midwestern hospital, and the executive in charge of communications for the hospital, the day after an incident, was scratching their head about what they were going to communicate, how are they going to engage. They started to call us a few days in, and she's walking her dog in the neighborhood, and lo and behold, her neighbor is a journalist for the main paper in their market. And she starts saying, he's asking how things at the hospital and how things at the clinics. And she reveals, we're not good. Our phones aren't working. Our emails are down. Really, what's going on? And we're just going through a cybersecurity incident. Oh, really? Reporter goes to the newsroom that morning, and guess what? Sends an email saying, I heard something's happening at the hospital. Could I get an on the record comment about what's happening? And, this is a large scale network and covers a good chunk of a state in the Midwest. And now the door has already been opened for that reporter. So there's already something revealed, but no facts other than something's going on, and they're obviously being hit. And so for sure, this is going to make the news, especially because this reporter already is on the story. And the reporter works, as many media outlets are. They're owned, by a consortium of, that owns a bunch of other newspapers in the region. So one story in a small market gets ballooned really, really quickly. And in this case, they did engage us relatively quickly, and we gave them our template playbook, and we started editing it to be in their voice and explain the facts from where they stood. And we contained their message to avoid the mouthy medical organization from being too mouthy. They were very disciplined once we were engaged, and that helped them to have a positive narrative about what they were doing next. And they did have some things they could talk about, like Brad was just saying, like, what have you done and what are you doing? And it can buy you time to say you're investigating and you get back to people in 4 hours or in a day. But whatever it is, coming back to people with that update, even if it's an update of no change in situation, our phone systems are still down, patients should communicate to the hospital this way or that way. In this case, this was a case the phones were down, emails were down, and they actually had an app that the patients had been advised to use, the MyChart app that a lot of hospitals use these days. And that became the central place where communication could take place between patients and providers. Other than that, I think they were putting signs on doors. If people arrived for a service, they didn't have a way to contact a patient to say, we can't provide that service today. So X-ray imaging was down for weeks, and other services got online relatively quickly, but not all. So you thought you had an X-ray plan for the next week to check up on something, you weren't going to be able to get it done. And that meant you were probably going to go to another provider.
So Neil mentioned there the question of on the record, off the record. So let me step out of my event host role and say I trained reporters on what is on the record and what is off the record legally. And so let me get, like, people do not understand what it means to be on the record and what it means to be off the record. So very bluntly, let me say everything is on the record. Everything is on the record. If you meet somebody on the street and you don't know that they're a reporter and you talk to them, it's on the record. If you sit down with a reporter and you say, hey, this is off the record, and then you start talking, it's on the record. If you are in front of a camera and you say, I don't mean for any of this to be public, and then you start talking, it's on the record. The only time when something is off the record is when both parties agree to it. So if you say to a reporter, or your PIO says to a reporter, hey, this is off the record, or this is on background, and the reporter agrees and says, yes, this is off the record, then it is off the record. Otherwise, it is not. And most people don't get that right. Also, anything that happens in the public, and if a camera can see it, unless you're zoomed into what would otherwise be a private space, it is public. If you have children walking on the sidewalk, you can't say, oh, get those kids' faces off the screen. They're private. They're minors. No, if they're in public, it's public. These are all things that are true and are covered by the First Amendment, and we can argue about whether they're right or wrong, but they are true. So anyway, since he mentioned off the record, I thought that would be really important for folks to understand what is actually on the record and what is off the record, what is public, what is not public. So things cameras can't do. You cannot zoom in to a hospital room that is considered a private space and show what's in that hospital room. If there is a conversation between two people standing in front of the hospital, let's say it's the IT director, let's say this might have happened at a city in the Pacific Northwest. Let's just say an IT director and the PIO were having an argument about what to say at a news conference, and one of them had a mic on, but they didn't mean for it to be public, and it got recorded. That is on the record. There you go. So this is a very important thing to know.
Even if you had a cute puppy with you.
Yeah, and Robert says suppose jurisdiction matters too, American versus global. 100%. I have only covered news in the U.S. I have no idea what the rule is in Canada or in France or anywhere else. 100%. Yes. And Mark says a verbal agreement to keep things off the record could be denied, so advisable not to say anything off the record. That's right. I would make sure it was recorded that there was that off the record back and forth before you do it. So yeah, 100%. All right. And sorry for getting insistent there, but it's very important.
It's true. I've had some of my background stuff attributed to me when I didn't want it to be. So,
yeah, because you did it wrong because you didn't listen to me. All right, Neil.
Yeah, and this is great. Yeah, so I think we were all familiar with Move It. Earlier this year, big case, 1,000+ organizations affected, 65 million people's records impacted. Many organizations, including the brand names that you see here, and our state, Oregon's Department of Transportation, our DMV, everyone's license information was out. Because there were so many brands affected, our case study with Quiet Credit Union over in the Mid-Atlantic, they were able to actually dodge some of the media coverage. They were named on social media, but the threat actor naming the names of organizations who had been hit. But in this case, the client called us early on. They were prepared, and they stayed in a reactive mode because they had two things going on. They had good trust with their customers, their credit union, their relatively tight-knit organization. Their members know them. And so being able to be giving their members some information about what was happening, because Move It was in the news for everybody, to be able to say, yes, we were caught up in this as well, didn't immediately lead to any of those customers leaking something to the media. They were being proactive with the audiences that mattered most. But they also wanted to put out like a press release on their website for a minute. And we were like, why would you do that? These other brands are going to get the bulk of the coverage. There's major, other financial institutions who've been hit. Why are you trying to be in that company? Just send your emails to the people you need to send them to. You don't need to post anything on your website right now. And that's as proactive as you need to be. In the end, a ton of coverage about Move It, almost no coverage at all in mainstream media about our friends at Quiet Credit Union. So
okay, but let me play devil's advocate with you there, Neil.
Sure.
So let's say that I'm a customer of this credit union, and I don't get the email. The email goes to spam, whatever, right? They have the wrong email address for me. When I signed up, I gave them a bogus email address, whatever, right? I don't see that. If there's nothing on their website, then I have no way to know it.
Yeah, I think that there's a way to be responsive without being advertising that you're in the midst of an incident, especially if your operations are not impacted. If you're not able to do basic banking operations and you're a bank, then you probably ought to put an alert on your website of something's going on and we're going to be in touch. But in this case, you could reach out to that credit union, and if you don't see something on their website, you could call. So we had talking points in a reactive manner for the credit union to use for that exact scenario. So
got it.
Jake goes on the website, doesn't see something. He's like, wait a minute, I don't trust this. Everybody's been hit. Surely they were hit too. Jake calls his credit union. They've got the talking points. You're right, Jake. We actually were hit. And here's what we're doing about it. And we do know that most of our customers, it seems like their information has, been accessed by this third party. And we'll be sending you information. It sounds like you didn't get the email. What's a better way we can send that to you? So the dialogue is left open, even though you're not putting, the big blaring alert message on the top of the homepage on your website.
Yeah. I mean, look, I talked to a lot of credit unions, just presented to like 200 credit unions. And one of the reasons to have a credit union is because you feel like it's something in your neighborhood, right? And you know these folks, as opposed to having a major national bank. So, it's interesting. You sort of want that to be able to call them and have a real conversation about it. So that seems right. So Brad, a question here, right? So this was the Move It vulnerability. And what we have seen in our research at Critical Insight is the number one way at this point that bad guys are getting into networks is not through the front door. It's through a third party vulnerability, whether it be Move It or the Microsoft Exchange vulnerability or the Log4j, blah, blah, blah. I can go on and on and on, right? And that right now, like everyone's dealing with a Cisco vulnerability. When you're building an incident response plan for somebody and a communications plan, I guess at this point you have to have a different one for, hey, we did this versus it came from a third party major international vulnerability that everyone's talking about.
Well, yeah, and your incident response plan, it's not really a standalone document. I mean, it ties into a lot of your policies and procedures and the way that you do business as an organization. So you can have an incident response plan, and then you can have separate playbooks. I've got a ransomware playbook where one of my third parties was ransomware. I have a playbook where the ceiling leaks and the server room gets flooded. I mean, all those are examples of incidents. You have those separate playbooks that you develop. And part of it, especially with a lot of the stuff we're seeing around Move It and the Cisco Vuln and Log4j, you really, really, it's very important. And I tell all my vCISO customers this. I tell people this during security awareness trainings, like any customer I can get to listen. You really need to do vendor reviews. It's one thing to do a thorough vendor review when you onboard a vendor. But like what we do here at CI is every year we go back and we review those vendor agreements. We review that vendor's security. We make sure it hasn't changed. And that is the problem that we ran into at that previous company I was at where we got hit. The vendor that had the leak and didn't tell us changed their processes and their policies to not notify people in the event of a breach. And that is what was our downfall. Now, had we done an annual vendor review, we may have caught that.
And Neil, so talk me through how is the communication different, or is it different if your breach comes through a third party that everybody's heard about, right? Do you, if it, in the earlier one, there were two employee caused things, right? An employee told a told somebody while they were walking the dog, and that's how it got out. And the other one, an executive clicked a link. And this one, this other company, much bigger company, has created the problem. Is your, in your communications, do you just like blame those guys?
I think that you can be transparent and do that in this case. I think that in the case where, if there's a patch that you didn't do, that you planned to do a month ago and you didn't do, and you guys got hit, you've got some of your own explaining to do. When there's a major international vulnerability exploited, like in MoveIt, I think that you are given a degree of cover because so many others are hit, that it actually helps you to be able to say, like so many others were hit, so were we. Here's how it happened here. Here's what we used MoveIt for in the past. And now here's what we're doing to recover. So I do think that you're given a little bit more grace because you're in so much other company. So that's sort of where I start with instance like MoveIt.
And Mike, Mike, do you agree with that? Do you think folks get cover if it comes from one of these big?
All of the reports I've seen where, and there's way more than 1,000 organizations affected, and pretty soon we're going to have a really nice, large statistical sample size of how this got handled by all these companies, right? Because they're all in the middle of this right now. But every one of the public reports where there's unauthorized disclosure of records and they have to report this, they also say, this was because of the MoveIt file transfer vulnerability. And they do point out that it happened at thousands of organizations. So I think I wouldn't call it a safe harbor, but yeah, it's providing a little cover. Mm-hmm. To your earlier question about, well, do you throw the vendor under the bus that was responsible for this, in the context of you saying that was, some kind of service provider, I think there is a gray area here where it's a tool that you're using that is widely known to have been compromised. You go, we got swept up in it too. And maybe that just doesn't look as bad.
Yeah. I think your reputation is right there. It's the not as bad because you're in this larger class of organizations who are hit. But I also think that it doesn't have the same air of throwing a third party under the bus. If you're just explaining, hey, this is what we use this third party for, and this is something that we had not expected, but this is how they had a vulnerability that was exploited. And again, in this case, there's so many news articles out there that kind of have that main, descriptive paragraph of how MoveIt, the exploitation, led to this, that you don't have, by just acknowledging that and what you used them for and what happened, people are like, oh yeah, I read that in my local paper. I heard that on my local news. Yeah, that jives with what I'm hearing out there. And so it keeps your credibility.
The thing that worries me is we're hearing a lot of companies still are just now coming to the table and saying, oh, we're affected by MoveIt. And it's been out for a while. My concern is, why didn't they know about this early on? They knew that they use that product. Why didn't they check to see if they're affected?
Yeah. Hey, and Neil, why don't you go here? What should you do? What are the internal versus external communications?
Yeah, I think, and this is stuff that we have in the templates that we can share with you all, but on the real bare bones basics, on the internal side, that escalation process we find to be the most important thing, because you want to have that spirit, just like you do in physical security, of if you see something, say something. Well, who are you going to say it to? So if someone realizes, I might have clicked on something bad just now, that didn't seem right, they need to have the confidence to be able to call someone in IT security and say, I think something happened. You at least tell their manager or tell IT. So depending on the organization culture, we draw up those escalation processes for people to know, how does their notification get sent, sort of small n notification go up the chain so people know there's something they need to work on. And that is, the audiences you see here. How's the board going to get notified? How's senior leadership going to learn about it? How are managers of people going to be informed so they know what to say to their employees? How are other customer-facing employees going to be given some FAQs to use, because they're going to get questions from patients and customers and callers. And so giving some people an early talking point, a set of talking points and some FAQs, really helpful on the internal side. Externally, depending on what type of organization you are, it's prioritizing those audiences as well. whether it's customers, investors, and stakeholders, law enforcement as well. And then, as we talked about, with media. And so you've got some really disciplined messages that you're going to use with those audiences. And then, depending on your organization, if you're SEC governed, if you're a financial institution, you've got a pretty quick turnaround now. You've got 4 days after you've been, had a material breach where you've got to report that. So you've got compliance deadlines that you're going to have to be meeting in a hurry. Healthcare folks, a little bit longer still, but not a ton of time. So you've got that in the back of your mind of the things that I want to do for these key stakeholders and these key audiences, and things I need to do for them as well, to keep in mind as you're building up that timeline. Most of these things you can have a draft statement for ahead of time. So just as Brad was talking about the playbooks you could have a playbook for any number of scenarios, and we help people build these all the time. So they've got something in their pocket and it's already in their voice. It fits their culture. It looks and feels like them. It's not just something off the shelf from like a law firm or a crisis.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between hearing from Bank of America and hearing from your neighborhood credit union, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So making it real, and I think we have some examples of those.
Not to, impugn Bank of America or anything, but, I do think that this is really important. And I love this slide because we're not done yet, but as a takeaway from this whole thing, if you focus on any slide here, this is a really good one to focus on, because what it helps you figure out is, how do you, how do you think about building your communications plan, and can you do it internally, right? And if you have an internal communications person, have they helped you, with these things? There are a couple of questions in the chat here. I'm going to answer the one that's going to get me into a lot of trouble first, and then we'll go to the ones that'll get me into less trouble. So Jennifer says, Jake covered off the record thoughts on a current attorney-client privilege concept. So I'm going to answer this with a bunch of questions, which is how an attorney would answer it. The first thing you need to do is, before an incident, talk to your attorney about how they think about attorney-client privilege and what is covered and not, because there have been a number of appellate court decisions on this recently, on what's discoverable, what's not discoverable, and what's covered. I have always been told that the attorney needs to be on the to line in the email, and it has to say, attorney-client privilege in the email. It can't be that the attorney is CC'd. It can't be that the attorney is part of the Slack message. It has to be there. But you need to ask your attorney ahead of time how to invoke attorney-client privilege in communications. And I know that there are some attorneys who are here in the thing, and you guys can argue with me, but absolutely, as part of your incident response planning, talk to your attorney about that. Mark asks a question. How big does an incident need to be before an entity is required to communicate the incident to regulatory agencies, the public, or your law firm? And then Michael says, what about the requirement to notify the Fed state when an event occurs? Hamilton, you want to take those?
Yeah, I have my one lame slide coming up that I will talk to about some of this mandatory reporting stuff. But so Mark's asking a really interesting question here, right? How big does it have to be? And there are actual boundaries for that. So, for example, if you're going to report to Health and Human Services or the Office of Civil Rights that you have had an unauthorized disclosure of protected health information, it's 500 records or more. If you are a publicly traded organization, it's 4 days after you have determined that the event was material, and when the meaning of material is to affect the shareholders. So that it's who they're trying to protect from this and exactly what the content of what's being stolen may be. So everybody has those boundaries around that. I think it's interesting that Mike's question here about Mike, stop barking at me. Mike's question about notifying states and feds, the Uber, and maybe even this is on the next slide. I don't know, Jake, but it's the Cyber Incident Reporting Critical Infrastructure Act, or Critical Infrastructure Cyber CIRCIA. Okay, no, you back up one right there. So all of this mandatory reporting, the one that's going to cascade to a whole lot of organizations is that last one. because if you are in some sector that is defined as critical infrastructure, dams, water, finance, energy, or local government that does a lot of that stuff, yeah, you got to report to the feds. And so there is a requirement to do that there. I haven't read exactly what the threshold for reporting there is, but it's going to have some language around unauthorized disclosure, a ransomware event, an extortion event. And the reason for this is because they want to aggregate all of this information so that they can have visibility across, the entire United States, so that we can eke out trends and things like that. Is a sector being hit more than others? Is there a specific target they're going after, right? Like right now it's extortion. Is there a group or a gang that's prevalent going after a sector, for example? So all of this reporting, this is not going to stop. And it's going to land on everybody. And I will point out too, and Neil made a good point about this very early on. When you report, yes, they're holding your feet to the fire, and you're doing it for compliance reasons, but you also need to do it because, especially if you've lost privacy information about your employees or your customers or something like that, you can expect a lawsuit. And that lawsuit can end up as a class action suit, and more, that's exactly what's happening. There are attorneys waiting for these things to happen, and as soon as they do, they're going to start identifying plaintiffs. And so when you report, yeah, you're doing it, the SEC told you to, DHS said we have to, but we're also trying to protect ourselves from having to, what suit out of us. So, I wouldn't say those are competing interests, but those are both things to keep in mind. It's compliance, but it's also trying to avoid that lawsuit.
Yeah, and so as we've been answering questions here, we're not going to get to all of our slides, but there's one thing that I really want to show folks, because we talked about credit unions earlier, and so you're going to have to pardon me for jumping back and forth on slides here. So if you're a credit union, if you're a small credit union, you don't buy all of your own ATMs. You use an outsourced company to manage your ATMs. Makes sense, right? And some of you in the audience may be in a credit union that does that. So there's a company called QSI that does this. QSI had a breach. ATMs stopped working. QSI had a communication to their customers that I want to bring up here. This is QSI's communication to its customers. It, day after, talked about not just what had happened, but that it was ransomware, that it was Black Cat. What is Black Cat? They, were able, they called out the the ability to terminate the EDR software from Sentinel-1. They then, the next day talked about their response and recovery things. And these are to their customers, right? So this is between QSI and credit unions. And then they also sent out all of the things to look for in your network. This is remarkable and unusual. And Neil, have you seen, I don't know that I've seen something quite like this. Have you seen something like this one before?
Never is the short answer. And it may be because the forensics folks hold on to this information and share it with the folks who actually would be able to do a scan for this. But when we think about customers, we're usually thinking about the general public, how to protect your data, how to ensure your privacy is secure. And so this level of technicality, not stuff that we usually have ever seen.
Yeah, and it's very unusual. And, one of the things that we told credit unions when they got this, because they were like, oh, is this good? We're like, this is amazing. Like, from a security point of view, this is great. Yeah. Would you tell the public this stuff? No. But, if you're, essentially B2B, this is a pretty remarkable communication. And so we wanted to bring it up here.
And I think this, especially because, QSI is in the financial space, I think this is a reminder to be in the constant spirit of information sharing. And whether you're in a financial services ISAC or a healthcare, or whether you are in something that's not sort of federally sponsored, but it's maybe a regional association of some kind to share information, this is the type of thing that I would want to share with my security peers and say, hey, this is what we got hit with. you might want to be looking for this stuff coming your way. That type of sharing across peers with government and with B2B, even if they're not in your space, like they're not like a customer per se, I think that is the type of thing that makes for a more resilient economy. But
yeah, and
broader conversation another day.
Yeah, good ethics, good comms. So the takeaways for folks here. So a couple of things. Number one, a reminder that we're going to get you video, we'll get you the slides. This here, having an incident response plan. Your incident response plan, for example, Brad works on incident response plans with organizations. You can use us to work on an incident response plan, and you need a communications part of that as well with a group like Neil's. Practice that plan. Don't just do a tabletop exercise that's technical. Also, how would you talk to the media? Ask your PR person if they know what it means to be off the record. Yes, you should ask them. Define your communications posture, the speed and transparency, right? And develop your relationships before a crisis, right? Do you have PR people who know who the media is, who, law enforcement, stakeholders? If you don't have your local FBI number, ask me for it. I have them. I will give you. The Seattle FBI people are fantastic if you're in Seattle, as are the Minneapolis ones. Those are the only ones I know. I'm sure there are other really good ones. But yeah, happy to make that. Now we're gonna a couple quick things. So we talked about here what we do, which is we help organizations prepare for an attack that involves the incident preparedness, and we can include groups. We can include Resolute, which is where Neil works, in that incident preparedness. Penetration testing, risk assessments, all things we do. That detection, because if you don't have that detection, you won't know when the bad guys are in your network. And it's going to be really hard to come up with a communications plan if you don't know what's happening. And having a SOC gives you that transparency into your own network, so you know what's happening. And then obviously the response. So nobody likes that 1 a.m. phone call. So having a retainer, which Neil talked about, having a communications retainer and an IT security retainer are really important. So if something happens at 1 a.m., you have folks on your side ready to go. And, let's do some final thoughts here, because we're toward the end. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go Brad, Mike, Neil, and me. Brad, final thoughts.
Yeah. So I think the important thing to take away from this is that, you can't always promise or guarantee that you're going to avoid a ransomware incident. It's how you respond that defines you as a company, and it's going to make sure that your customers remain your customers. If you have a good response and you're organized and you're ready for it, it makes all the difference in the world versus not being ready and kind of having to shoot from the hip. So,
Mike, final thoughts.
Final thought is what I put in the chat there is one other takeaway is, know what these rules are, because if you're a publicly traded hospital, HHS and the SEC are both telling you different things. And so you're going to have to respect both of those. If you are, for example, in the finance sector, you're also considered critical infrastructure. So, you're going to have to kind of sort through some of these things, and there may be a little disentanglement to do.
Neil, final thoughts.
It's only as hard as you make it. Practice the plan, practice communicating, do some dry runs, and you will feel so much better when you are in it. And you'll feel like just the marathon trainer who went through it all. And now, you're just running. You're just running because you've done this so many times before. So we're here for you. Use Critical Insight, and happy to be helpful to you as well.
Hey, and I did forget one thing, which is we have a survey at the end of all of these. We appreciate your opinion about how this was. My colleague Ginny is going to put it in the chat. Sorry for not putting that in earlier. Please take that survey while I tell you this. This was all off the record. No, totally kidding. Look, this is a really, really, really important thing. Make sure you know what your communication is going to be. If you want somebody to call me and talk about what it's like to be in a newsroom when one of these things happen, let me know. I have a list of questions journalists are going to ask you. Happy to give that to you. Neil and I are going to work on a template for y'all. Like, here are the things you need to do. But do not wait until 1 a.m. on a Saturday when an event has occurred to start thinking about this stuff. It is really, really important that you do it right now. And we're here for you. My email address is up there, jake@criticalinsight.com, neil.simon@resolutestrategicservices.com. thank you everybody for joining us. Please, again, take that survey. We look forward to hearing, hey, was this good? Was this useful? And thank you for attending this very off the record presentation. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
On background, bye-bye.
On background. Goodbye.